is not measured by how much you can hold on to, but by how much you can rebuild once it's gone. And today, when he walks through the world, he carries a different aura. Not arrogance, not pride, but certainty. The certainty of a man who has seen the worst and refused to surrender. The certainty of a man who built himself without shortcuts, without excuses, without waiting for miracles. And now he stands as a reminder to everyone who feels broken, lost, or defeated, that your story is not over, that your losses do not define you, and that you can rebuild from nothing if you are willing to suffer for the life you want. Because greatness is not given, it is earned by men who refuse to stay down. And he will forever be the example of that truth. The guy who lost everything and built himself again. And even after rebuilding himself, he never forgot the nights that broke him, the mornings that tested him, the moments when he wanted to give up but forced himself to take one more step. Because those moments became the armor around his soul, the quiet strength that no one sees but everyone feels. And he carried that strength with humility, knowing that life could knock him down again at any moment, but also knowing that he now had the mindset to rise every time. Because once a man learns how to rebuild himself from zero, fear loses its power, uncertainty loses its sting, and failure becomes nothing more than a lesson. And as he moved forward, he realized that the greatest victory wasn't the success people admired. It was the person he became in the process. The version of himself that could face anything without breaking. The version that no longer needed validation or comfort or applause to feel worthy. Because he had already seen who he truly was when everything was taken away. And he knew that the man who stood back up was a warrior, forged by life itself, and that truth made him unstoppable. But what people didn't understand was that rebuilding was never a straight path. It twisted. It turned. It tested his patience and discipline. It forced him to restart again and again. But every restart built resilience. Every setback sharpened his character. And every failure became another brick in the foundation of the man he was becoming. Because rebuilding yourself is a long, brutal, lonely journey. One that requires you to let go of your ego, detach from your past, and face the parts of yourself you've spent years avoiding. And he did exactly that. He confronted his weaknesses. He demolished his excuses. He silenced the inner voice, telling him he wasn't enough. And he forced himself to grow, even when growth felt painful, because comfort had already betrayed him once, and he swore he would never return to it again. And as he kept pushing forward, something incredible happened. His pain turned into power, his scars turned into wisdom, and his losses transformed into the fuel that drove him. And he realized that what he once saw as the worst moment of his life was actually the turning point he desperately needed. Because without losing everything, he would have never discovered what he was capable of building. And as his life slowly rose from the ashes, he carried his past not as a burden, but as a reminder that the strongest men are not the ones who never fall, but the ones who rise after every fall, with fire in their eyes and purpose in their hearts. And this truth shaped his entire mindset, that the world does not reward the man who complains. It rewards the man who persists. The one who keeps going even when he's tired, even when he's doubted, even when no one believes in him. Because belief is not something you wait for. It's something you build by showing up every single day. And he built it through discipline, through grind, through relentless commitment, until his actions became undeniable. And slowly the world around him shifted. Opportunities grew, doors opened, and people who once overlooked him began to admire him. But again, he didn't rebuild himself for admiration. He rebuilt himself for liberation. The liberation from his old fears, his old failures, his old identity. Because the greatest freedom is becoming the version of yourself you once thought was impossible. And he achieved that through patience and perseverance. Never chasing perfection, just chasing progress. Inch by inch, day by day. And as he looked at his new life, he understood something profound. Rebuilding yourself is not just about creating a better future. It's about rewriting the meaning of your past, proving that your worst moments were not meant to destroy you, but to shape you into someone more powerful, more aware, more determined. And he lived with that awareness every single day, refusing to let success make him soft or comfortable, because he knew comfort was the enemy of the man he wanted to remain. So he kept pushing, kept evolving, kept training his mind and body to stay sharp, because he never wanted to return to the weak. The guy who lost everything and built himself again isn't just a story. He is the living proof that a broken man can become unstoppable once he decides that defeat is not his final chapter. Because there was a time when his life was stripped down to nothing but dust and silence. When the world looked at him and saw someone who was done, someone who would never rise again. But in that darkness, something changed. Something awakened deep inside him. A fire that pain itself couldn't kill. And in that moment, he realized that losing everything was not the end of him, it was the beginning. Because standing in the ruins of his old life, he saw everything clearly for the first time. He understood that nobody was coming to save him. Nobody was going to hand him a second chance. And nobody was going to feel the weight of his struggle except him. So he stopped waiting and started building, piece by piece, day after day, through the kind of effort that breaks weak men but sharpens the strong. And he rebuilt himself not with comfort, but with discipline. Not with ease, but with grit. Because he learned that a man is not defined by what he loses, but by what he chooses to become. When everything is taken from him, and every morning he woke up with that reminder carved into his heart, pushing him forward when the world tried to knock him down again. Pushing him through the loneliness, the sleepless nights, the doubts that whispered he wasn't enough. The memories of the past that tried to drag him back, but he refused to break. He refused to quit. He refused to let the worst version of himself be the last version. And slowly, the man he used to be died, replaced by someone stronger, someone sharper, someone forged in failure and rebuilt through relentless effort. Because when you have nothing left to lose, you become dangerous in a way that people cannot understand. And he became that kind of dangerous, focused, hungry, fueled by purpose, no longer chasing approval, no longer begging for support, no longer relying on anyone except the man in the mirror. And that's when life started to change. Not because blessings suddenly appeared, but because he created opportunities with his own hands. Because he stopped asking for chances and started taking them. Because he stopped wishing for strength and started building it with every rep, every setback, every lesson carved into his soul. And every time he fell, and trust me, he fell countless times, he got up faster, stronger, more determined, because he learned that failure is not the opposite of success, but the foundation of it. And over time, the world that once ignored him started to notice. The people who once doubted him started to wonder how he was still standing. And the same voices that once told him he would never make it began to whisper his name with respect. But none of that mattered to him anymore because he wasn't rebuilding himself for validation. He wasn't growing to impress anyone. He wasn't rising to prove the world wrong. He was rising to prove himself right. And true strength comes from that mindset. The mindset of a man who knows that rock bottom is not a grave. It is a starting point, a launch pad, a chance to recreate yourself without the noise of the old world. And the guy who lost everything understood this better than anyone. Because when he looked at the ashes of his past life, he didn't see tragedy. He saw raw material. He saw the chance to build a version of himself that fear could not control, excuses could not slow, and failure could not destroy. And rebuilding yourself is not glamorous. It is not loud. It is not filled with applause. It is built in silence, when no one is watching, when your body hurts, when your mind screams to stop, when your heart feels heavy but your purpose feels heavier. And you carried that purpose, like a warrior carries a sword, not as a burden but as a responsibility. Because a man who has lost everything learns the value of everything, and he no longer wasted time on the things that once distracted him, the people who once drained him, the habits that once weakened him. Instead, he replaced them with discipline, routine, sacrifice, and unbreakable focus. And slowly his life transformed. Not overnight, not magically, but through thousands of small choices that compounded into greatness. And as he rebuilt himself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, he discovered a truth most men never realize. Sometimes, losing everything is exactly what you need to finally meet the strongest version of yourself. Because the version of him that rose from the ashes was not the same man who fell into them. He was reborn through hardship, sculpted by consistency, and powered by a belief that no matter how many times life destroys him, he will always come back stronger. Because strength